The Frogs get bowl eligible tomorrow. They hit that 6-win mark, with 3 games to go. We'll talk about how next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us on your favorite podcast platform. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Appreciate you joining us. It is Friday afternoon. That's when I'm recording this. TCU Baylor, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock at McLean Stadium. Game will be on ESPN2. Excited about this one. I said earlier this week, it feels like for the first time in a long time, these two rivals are trending up at the same time. There have been years where they've both been bad in the past decade or so. There have been years in the past decade where one has been good, one has been struggling. It's been a while since both teams seem to have some juice and some momentum coming into the game. And that's where we're at, as both schools have won 2 in a row. Baylor going through a little bit of transformation with Sawyer Robertson taking over at quarterback. That's paid off in a big way. And TCU getting off the mat after that loss to Houston at home a few weeks ago. So it's going to be a tough ball game. I think there's a lot of things working in Baylor's favor. One is they're just playing at a high level right now, offensively especially. 59 points they scored against Texas Tech a couple weeks ago. Last week against Oklahoma State at home, 38 points. I believe, and I know TCU people might roll their eyes at this, but I think it's going to be a good atmosphere at McLean Stadium, at least to start the game, because they're honoring their 2013 and 2014 Big 12 championship teams. That's been a long time in the making. Because of the scandal with Art Briles and that coaching staff, that university has kind of kept their distance from those players and coaches, but they're welcoming the players back. And it's a night game. It's on national television. Team is playing well. So it's going to be up to TCU to take the crowd out of it. Now, Frogs have played well on the road this year, including in some tough road environments. I mean, Kansas at Arrowhead, it was a little bit different because KU was struggling, but still, that's a place that gets loud and it's a fan base that has been starving for some success in football. And then going on the road and defeating Utah. We know Utah is having a lot of trouble, but it was loud in that place, and TCU held on to win 13-7. So what are the keys to the game in this big-time matchup? I think it starts defensively with finding a way to make Sawyer Robertson uncomfortable. And when you look at the numbers, he took over. He's had an interesting career. So he's originally from Lubbock. That's where he played his high school ball. He goes to Mississippi State. Baylor gets him in the transfer portal a few years ago, and it was the offseason where Dave Aranda sent Gary Bohannon packing, or he was just upfront and honest with him and said, hey, I think we're going to give the reins to Blake Shapen. Gary decides to move on to South Florida. They bring in Sawyer Robertson, and it was kind of like, hey, here's a guy who put up some good numbers in high school, was a highly rated recruit. Maybe he could do something for you, but he was stuck behind Blake Shapen for a couple of seasons. There were times where he might have challenged him for the job, but it never really came full circle for him. Daquan Finn comes in this offseason from Toledo, MAC Player of the Year. He was like the big name guy that they landed, that they were going to say, hey, this is our dude, and we're going to sort of transform our offense with him. They bring in Jake Spavital, the OC from formerly of Texas State as a head coach and been around in other places as well. And it looked like Daquan Finn was going to be the guy, but he gets hurt. Robertson takes over and slowly just kind of takes over the job and doesn't look back. And especially when you look at the last 2 weeks, when I talked about how they've put up huge numbers, scoring 59 points against Texas Tech and then 38 points against Oklahoma State, he's done it in a variety of ways too. I mean, against Tech, it was just super efficient through the air. He had 5 touchdown passes, no interceptions, and he threw for 274 yards, 21-32. Against Oklahoma State, 11-19 for 222. 3 touchdowns, did throw 1 pick, and then he had 8 carries for 73 yards. He's an intriguing player because he's not super – I mean, you wouldn't think he's super dynamic running the football, but there have been games this year where it seems like he's very smart about picking his spots, whether it's in the zone read game or scramble drill. I feel like I have the edge, or maybe I can use a pump fake to get somebody off their feet and then run around them. Because against Colorado – he had 9 rushes for 82 yards and a touchdown, including 1 45-yard touchdown run. And I mentioned against Oklahoma State, 8 for 73 with a touchdown as well, and had a 40-plus yard run in that ball game. So you have to account for it, but it's not something that he's going to do all the time. Overall, though, 17 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's playing really good ball at the moment, and he's very efficient. Baylor, the way they spread it around, they don't have just one skill guy who is head and shoulders better than everyone else, but they've got a number of players that have put up some respectable numbers this season. Josh Cameron is their leading receiver. He's got 365 yards on 25 receptions. Ashton Hawkins behind him, 346 on 24 receptions. Al Presley has 300 yards receiving. Keyshawn Jackson has 165. Monterey Baldwin is a guy they really like. He's only got 158, but he's a speedster, and he's been very productive for them in the past. In the run game, in the run game, they're averaging about 5 yards a carry. Bryson Washington, 380 on the ground. Dawson Pendergrass with 262. So they've spread it around with a number of different guys, and it's just kind of pick your poison. Not one player that's kind of their go-to person, but a lot of different guys who are capable. So can you find a way to rush the passer, keep Robertson uncomfortable, force him into some obvious passing situations, and then be able to shut down those receivers on the back end? One thing that I would be concerned about as a TCU fan is I think the secondary has been better as of late. But, I mean, Lamarian James is going to be your guy locking up number one wide receiver for most of the time. Because Baylor has different guys that like to spread the ball around to, you're going to need quality play from everybody. That means when JT Broughton's in there, he's got to find a way to lock up. When Channing Canada's in there, he's got to find a way to be competitive and make life hard on these Baylor wide receivers. But it all comes back to this season has been revived from them or by them with the play of their new quarterback. You need to find a way to get him off his spot, pressure him, force him into some bad throws and some tough situations. Offensively, the Baylor defense, Dave Aranda has taken over the play calling, and there have been some good things from that. They got 17 sacks this year. They disguise their pressures and their blitzes pretty well. They're running a fairly complex scheme with Dave at the helm, and it seems like they're throwing kind of the kitchen sink at quarterbacks this year. But they're also 78th overall in scoring defense. They're giving up 25 points a game, 63rd in the country in passing defense and passing yards allowed with 216. So not Texas Tech level bad, but still there's some vulnerability there. And then in the rushing game, 72nd in the country, giving about 150 yards up per game. So this will keep being a key until it stops. You just have to find a way to eliminate the turnovers. I think there's hay to be made against this Baylor defense. They've given up points this year, with the exception of early in the year. They played Air Force. They played Tarleton. They gave up 3 points in each of those ball games. But they gave up 43 to Iowa State. And even in these games they've won, I mean, they played better against Tech. That game got out of hand before Tech really started to make things happen. They ended up scoring 35 points, but it was a little misleading because a lot of that was in garbage time when the game was out of reach. Oklahoma State scored 28, and they were able to kind of match up score for score, but Baylor got key stops when they needed to. This TCU offensive line, it was rough last week. I mean, that was a Tech team that was not coming in with a lot of pressures and a lot of sacks, and they had Josh Hoover running around for his life, being uncomfortable, and we know when Josh struggles, things get off schedule. He's trying to do too much, leaving the pocket, running full speed, trying to hit Jeremy Payne on a wheel route, just kind of hangs one up there, gets tipped up in the air, gets picked. That RPO play, sort of unlucky. I mean, he just kind of threw it right in the stomach of the linebacker who made a good effort by just jumping up and being there in the passing lane, but I don't think he was trying to get an interception. It just happened to kind of fall in his lap, literally. But you have to protect the ball. And when this offense gets out of its own way, it's been pretty solid. I think this is a Baylor defense that they can score on. You need to play smart, clean football, though, in order to do that. And then I think the third key is don't give up free points on special teams. The kicking game has been an adventure this year. You have to capitalize there. Can't give up big punt return, big kick return. All those momentum-changing plays. I believe you're going to have a crowd that wants to be engaged, wants to be involved in the football game. So you have to find a way to keep them quiet. Make them search for something to cheer for. Don't allow those just huge swings on the third phase of the game on special teams. That's going to make a big difference. Should be fun. Like I said, I think there's a lot of things that are working in Baylor's favor, but I feel like TCU has played better as of late. Still not perfect. Still some adversity that's self-inflicted. Still some things that have been a struggle. But I don't feel like they'll be intimidated by the road environment. They played well on the road this year. I believe they're starting to kind of see the light, see the process evolve and fall into place, and that they find a way to win this football game. I don't have a score prediction. I think I said 41-38 on the Locked On crossover. I feel like points are going to be scored. And defensively, it's about, can you hold on? Can you force a turnover? Can you get a stop when you have to? And offensively, can you just continue to be efficient and not have that mid-game or second quarter or third quarter lull where you just kind of fall asleep and have a bunch of empty possessions? Go score. I'm also intrigued to see what do they continue to do as they evolve with what they've done in this run game with Savion Williams. Are there any new wrinkles they try to throw out there? Do they stick with that similar workload for him of 10 to 15 carries? They put him in the backfield last week, isolated him against the linebacker, busted coverage, he goes to the house. They found something with that, and they need to continue to isolate him in situations where he can thrive and can make plays. And I think this will be another opportunity for him to show off like that type of Deebo Samuel. I saw somebody this week compare him to Cordell Patterson, who was kind of a Swiss Army knife type of guy and has been for the Falcons and Vikings in his career. Can he continue to show that on tape as his year and his production goes on the uptick? TCU Baylor tomorrow night. We'll have post-game show afterwards. I'm guessing 11:30. Once the game wraps up, we'll go live. Win or lose, we'll have real raw reaction. That's how we do it here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. One of our great sponsors to help us, keep the lights on here at the Locked On Network is FanDuel. FanDuel is where the game starts. They make it easy for you. You go to FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. You win one $5 bet and you get $150 in bonus bets. Again, that's one $5 bet. And that gets you $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. FanDuel is where the game starts. College football. Baylor 3.5-point favorites this weekend. NFL games. Cowboys back in action against the Falcons this week. Rare noon kickoff for the Cowboys. Us Cowboy fans get to get our misery out early in the day, which is kind of nice. College basketball around the corner. NBA in full swing. NHL happening. Great time to be a sports fan. Great time to join FanDuel. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. So one thing I noticed this week, and I realize we're always dealing with short sample size or small sample sizes, I guess I should say. I love the people that chime in here, but I'm not going to pretend like I'm reaching a huge amount of the TCU fan base, right? So it's still, there's some of us, our opinions, they don't represent everybody who cheers for this team. But I did notice, I got a lot of comments after the post-game show about Josh and some of his struggles, especially with turning the ball over. That's been the biggest issue. I also got an email from Greg Thompson he seemed very upset. And Greg listens and watches the show on a daily basis, which I love all the people that do that. I appreciate you guys. If you take any time to listen to me and watch it, thank you for doing that. I don't take that for granted. But he said that at some point last week, which honestly, I don't remember this. And I know I talk a lot every week, but I do feel like I typically have a pretty good idea of what people are referencing. He said that I made the comment that I love Josh Hoover, which I'm not doubting him. I'm sure I did make that comment at some point. I believe, in my mind, the last time I said something like that, directly like that, was after the UCF game. And it was because I saw he gave a short speech to the team after that ball game where he was just very encouraging. And he took accountability, but it was like, let's turn the page, and I still believe in all you guys and I love all you guys. And since he took over, the thing that stood out to me, I think he just carries himself really well. I feel like the team responds to him. They have his back. They rally around him. They believe in him. All the intangible stuff, he checks all those boxes. Now, I realize that's not the end-all be-all. I think that is a big part of being the quarterback and being the leader on the team. But if you can't produce, if you're making mistakes at a certain point, some of that stuff seems to kind of fall to the floor and falls flat because you have to show it on the field as well as be the guy that's vocally encouraging everyone, taking responsibility, holding other people accountable. All that stuff culminates into one. So he's not perfect. And I honestly believe the first 4 or 5 games of the season, he played at an elite level, like one of the best QBs in the Big 12. Cam kind of caught me off guard. Cam Stewart kind of caught me off guard with a question about all Big 12 quarterback. Like, could he be that guy? Shedeur Sanders is going to be your first team dude, I believe. And then second team sort of up for grabs. But the more I think about it, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, Rocco Becht is having a really good year at Iowa State. Avery Johnson's having a nice season. Jake Retzliff at BYU, they're undefeated. I mean, I think there's people in front of him who are having better years. And I saw this story from Shehan Jayaranja, who covers college football for CBS Sports. He ranked Big 12 quarterbacks, and he put them in tiers. So in tier 1, he's got, like, these are your all Big 12 contenders. Shedeur Sanders at Colorado, Rocco Becht at Iowa State, Jake Retzliff at BYU. Those are the 3 that are in contention. After that, he's got rising stars. Avery Johnson at Kansas State, Sawyer Robertson at Baylor, Brendan Sorsby at Cincinnati, who's quietly having a really good year, and since he's a pretty solid team, I think this is going to be a tough game for the Frogs when they go up there in the season finale. And then Josh Hoover from TCU has got him in tier 2. And he, wrote a little blurb about Hoover where he said Hoover's one of the toughest quarterbacks to evaluate in the Big 12. No one has thrown for more yards. His 2,614 and his 19 touchdowns trail only Shedeur Sanders. That said, Hoover's mistakes have cost the Frogs multiple games. He's had 4 games with at least 2 interceptions, including 2 of the 3 losses. There's a great deal of talent there, but Hoover has to tighten things up. And that's all really fair. I mean, he's put up outstanding numbers. The Kendall Briles offense lends itself with as much as they throw the ball, as much as there are high percentage throws kind of baked into the offense, your completion percentage should be pretty solid. You should be able to put up a decent number of yards. The question is, can you convert in winning time in the red zone? And honestly, for the most part, TCU's done a good job with that this year. He has 19 touchdown passes, but the interceptions are killer. 4 games with 2 picks is rough, man. And yeah, the Houston game, there's a lot of blame to go around, but it starts with the offense, especially in the first half, was just non-existent. They scored 1 touchdown. They go into halftime down 24-6. Defense, yeah, they had their struggles, but the offense had multiple opportunities to go down and kind of set the tone early in that ball game, and they couldn't do it. And Josh turned the ball over a few times, and it really took the wind out of the team's sails. They were fortunate to win that KU game, but there are some pretty mind-numbing interceptions in that ball game too. He floated up that pass to J.P. Richardson on a long 3rd down near the goal line, gave up that pick. Defense was able to hold him to a field goal, which is a big deal. Also threw that interception against KU later in the game. As much as I loved his performance at times against UCF, bottom line is in the second half, when the offense had a couple chances to respond and stem the tide, they just couldn't do it. SMU was a disaster, turned the ball over multiple times in that ball game, had the fumble on the first offensive possession that gave SMU a 10-0 lead, and really they never looked back from that. So the list goes on. The turnovers are a killer. I do think it's worth mentioning. Here's my optimistic view on Josh. He's still a young QB. Like, it doesn't feel like it. We've got 14 starts under his belt, 13 starts, 14 starts. He's played 8 games this year, played 6 games last year, 14 starts. So we've got a full year plus of starts to evaluate. And maybe some people are like, this is who he is. I believe with one more offseason, we could see another big jump going into next year, which I think will be 2025 will be like put up or shut up time. And I don't know what they're going to do in the offseason as far as QB battle goes. If I had to guess right now, I don't think there would be one. But, I mean, I could see them saying, hey, let's let Haas take a lot of reps and see what he can do. But the turnovers have to get fixed. And I think part of that's not reading the defense well. He seems to have trouble seeing safeties on the field at times. I think another issue is just, as I've said before, I feel like he just tries to do too much at times. And, you know, they'll get behind in a ball game and he's trying to score 30 points on one drive when it's like, no, we gotta chip away at this lead. But that being said, I mean, that Tech comeback was impressive. They put together a couple of long, methodical drives to go score. Then they had the big pop play with the play to Eric McAllister for the touchdown. That was a good back shoulder throw. So I think there's still room for him to grow. And he could really be a contender for like elite QB throughout the season next year. But I'm open to opinions. I'm open to disagreements. Hit me up here on the YouTube comments. You can tweet at me at SimcockSteven. I might try to get Shahan on next week to talk about this more in depth and just see what he thinks of Josh as a passer. Because I do agree. Like, I think the arm talent is really good. It's just about honing it in and finding a way to make it work. And then we've said, you know, one limitation here is whether it's because he's unwilling to or he just can't do it. He's not really a dual threat guy. And that's a huge part of what they want to do offensively. And so when that's not available, it does kind of limit what they can really do from a scheme perspective. We'll come back and wrap things up here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. 5 Hour Energy. What's your fan fuel? Fuel your fandom. Late game this week. Night game. Got to get fueled up. You can go to 5hourenergy.com. You can get 5 Hour Energy online now. It's not just at the convenience store. You can create your own 12-pack. That's available on 5hourenergy.com. It's nationwide. Create your own 12-pack today. Get ready for that TCU Baylor game with your own special flavor of 5 Hour Energy. Fuel your fandom. 5 Hour Energy, a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. One thing to mention today, TCU basketball is playing a scrimmage against one of the most talented. TCU men's basketball is playing a scrimmage against one of the most talented teams in the country, and that's Arkansas. The game will be at Dickies Arena. It's not being televised or streamed anywhere, which is pretty crazy to me. But 7 p.m. tonight, they got, I mean, just to be real about it, they got knocked around by Texas in their first scrimmage. That was kind of a secret scrimmage, meaning there weren't people there. So can't really give a ton of details about what happened or how. I mean, Texas is a good team. Rodney Terry has done a nice job there. But a lot of new faces for this TCU group. And if you want to get over to Dickies Arena, you can see them in action for the first time. And then the women, they'll get underway on Tuesday against Houston Christian at home, 6:30 p.m. Exciting year for them as Mark Campbell goes into year 2. And they've got a lot of talented transfers. So basketball season right around the corner. I'll try to have some more hoops content for you this upcoming year. The men will kick off Monday against Florida A&M. So we'll have some more hoops content as those games get going and we get to see this team in action. But one thing I do love about the transfer portal, even though it's frustrating at times because you never really know like who's going to do what and it takes time for the team to gel, it is a lot of fun to watch just everything play out. And I like just getting to see new players on the court. Like that's just a fun thing for me. So that'll be an intriguing aspect of this year for Jamie Dixon. Some of your thoughts as we get ready for TCU and Baylor. Tanner says the main thing Sonny said that I loved hearing is we need to run the ball to beat Baylor, and I hope they can throw it as well and get these backs going and build their confidence. Yeah, you got to run the ball well. I mean, I'm at the point with TCU that I'm kind of skeptical of how well they can do it. I think they found a workaround here with Savion Williams, which is nice. But you're right. I mean, you got to build these backs' confidence. And you've had a couple guys that have had good individual games, but nobody's been able to be consistent. Maybe they can find some more consistency in the traditional way this year. Big Easy says, Tech, you lost. You got to man up. So what he's referring to, Texas Tech called for an investigation because there was news that came down. Basically, helmet communications were unencrypted in the Big 12. The frequencies that they were on were unencrypted. So in theory, if you knew the frequency, you could listen into helmet comms between coaches and players. So Tech wanted an investigation of the TCU and Baylor games because supposedly TCU and Baylor were tipped off to this. They let the Big 12 know, but the Big 12 didn't let Tech know until later. An investigation was done. Jacob Langford mentioned here. The Big 12 did an investigation. They've ruled that there was no wrongdoing. So this is really a nothing burger, but it is a funny story. And yes, Tech, you just lost. You got to take your L. You've lost 2 in a row. A rough deal. Devil Frog says we still have to get better in the trenches, both sides of the ball. Yeah, they sure do. I mean, I don't really know what you can do about it this year. I think next year will be a big year for the O-line because we'll get to hopefully see some of these young guys that they've recruited step up and take these roles. You also have a lot of these transfers that could come back, and then we'll see what they do in the portal. And then D-line wise, getting Paul Olawale back could be a huge boost if he's healthy come spring ball. I think Marcus Deal has done some nice things, but yes, you have to get more depth on the trenches and both sides of the ball. That's the hallmark of a good team. And TCU simply just doesn't have it right now. They've got some guys who can play, but whether it's consistent with your starters or the depth behind them, it's just not there at the moment. So that's something that they're going to have to work on. Richard Berry says, for Avalos, his recruits haven't hit campus yet, and we've seen flashes of what we could be. To be honest, the defense lost its top 2 corners before the year, had some D-line injuries. I think I'd like to see his recruits hit campus and see how it goes. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And I talked about this. There have been injuries that have been a huge factor with this defense. And lately, I've been more impressed with what Andy's been able to cook up schematically. I think they're playing at a higher level. It's just coming at a slower pace than we would like. TCU Baylor Saturday night post-game show after the game. Thank you for bearing with me this week as I was on vacation. For my YouTube viewers, I'm sorry that I didn't have content up every single day, but we did end up with 5 videos this week. And thank you for just giving me grace. I appreciate that. You guys give me grace in a lot of areas, technically sometimes with some of the issues we have, and I'm grateful for it. Love you guys. Take it easy. Talk to you tomorrow night. Locked On Horned Frogs. Your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.